What's going on, everyone? This is Torch contributor Frank Peteani back with another edition of Pro Wrestling Then and Now here on the pwtorch YouTube.
Frank, you're muted.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that.
You weren't for the first half of the introduction, then all of a sudden you went dark.
Yeah, I don't know what the heck happened. I'm just going to keep my arms like back here and not touch anything. My God, you talk about a botch. That's a botch. That might be added to Botchamania here at the Torch YouTube and the Torch page in general. But anyway, we are we're back with another edition of Pro Wrestling Then and Now. Today, reviewing WrestleMania 11, and as you can see, the good-looking guy on the other side of the screen there is joining me, as he will be throughout the year, for a 1995 WWF review, because he is the one brave enough to do it. Ladies and gentlemen, your friend and mine, Torch contributor John Mezzera. John, I say that with the highest compliments, my friend.
Thank you, Frank. It's going to be a fun journey. It's already started, and looking forward to it. Looking forward to continuing.
Absolutely,
throughout the year.
No, listen, it's fun. I mean, this is like we kind of talked about with the Rumble when we reviewed that. It's a time that leads to the Monday Night War era. You know, we start to see kind of the end of gimmicks, the end of the old way of doing things, which I think is a big factor on this show that we'll talk about as we go through WrestleMania 11. And then, come a year or so, we start to see some big changes in the company and big changes in the presentation. So we'll get to all that. Let me get a couple of housekeeping items out of the way. Hope you had a chance to listen to the last episode of this show where Zach Barber, who you all might know as Zach in Texas, frequent emailer on the Wade Keller shows, joined me to review Uncensored from WCW of that year. It was nice to meet Zach, nice to talk to him. And get his take on WCW. Him and I have been chatting WCW for a number of years, so check that out. The pay-per-view that infamously got Dustin Rhodes and Barry Darsow fired. So check out our discussion of that. Coming up later in the month, I'm taking a bold adventure, and I'm going to dive into 1995 ECW, looking at Hostile City Showdown. Todd Martin will join me. Y'all might know him on the Torch VIP side. He was in the building for that event, so he will be reviewing it with me. It'll be a learning experience for me. Full disclosure, I was not watching ECW live at the time, so I'm going to kind of sit back and let Todd lead the way on that, and hope to learn something because he was there, and of course, we all know Todd's wrestling knowledge and history and things like that. I want to give a shout to my friend Jesse Velasquez over at Top Rope Nation, who's currently reviewing 95 ECW on his podcast throughout the year. So I'm learning a little bit from him, of course, and we'll take a lot from Todd when we do that show. Of course, you can go VIP if you are not. If you're watching this on the YouTube page, first of all, thank you. And thank you to everybody in the chat. Put some comments up. We'll post them. We'll add you to the discussion. If you are not a Torch VIP member, then it's pwtorch.com/govip. Let me see if I cannot screw this up and actually post it for a second. Here we go. There it is, pwtorch.com/govip. You could sign up with a credit card, debit card, PayPal, Patreon, Spotify, or your own Apple account. Plenty of options to go VIP. It's totally worth it. Speaking of Todd Martin, you get his fix. You get everything with Rich Fan, Collision Cafe with Brian Zillum and Amin Ajini, and of course, the post-pay-per-view reviews. They're all must listen. And if I'm missing any VIP shows, Alan Forel, Pro Wrest Paradise. So plenty of VIP content. Of course, please like the show, comment below, and subscribe to the PW Torch YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate it. All right, John. We started chatting a little bit about WrestleMania 11 offline, and let's be honest, it's a show that not a lot of people view favorably. In fact, let's put it bluntly, a lot of people say it's the worst WrestleMania of all time. Or you might get things like that show sucked. Let's let's be honest about it. I rewatched it. I can't really fight that sentiment. It's not a good show. The wrestling isn't that great. It's not egregious. There's some stuff on there, but what are your thoughts, just kind of overall, before we get into specifics about WrestleMania 11?
Well, for me, nothing will ever, well, let's hope. Nothing will ever beat WrestleMania 9 for worst WrestleMania ever.
Ooh,
I will throw that down every time.
them's fighting
WrestleMania 9,
words.
yeah, yeah. I don't even think it's close. So
Mm,
this wasn't, good by any stretch of the
right.
imagination. And it's definitely in that bottom tier, I would
Mhm.
say.
Oh yeah,
But worst, no. But when there's been 40, and if I'm gonna split hairs and say, well, it's not the worst, but it's in the bottom five, well, that means there's like at least 35 better. So that's not high praise. Just
yeah,
saying it's, and there's, WrestleMania 4, WrestleMania 2 wasn't great. There's
yeah.
there's a lot of, not great WrestleManias out there, and some of them were,
27,
what's that?
27.
See, anything past 20, from like 20 to 40 just
Oh, it's
blurs in
all
my mind.
it's all a blur.
You'd
It's
have
all a
to you'd
blur.
have to like give me a main event. What's 27?
That's the one with Cena and the Miz.
Okay. And the one that had, there's always like one great match, right? In that stretch, because there's going to be like an Undertaker Michaels, or there's going to be a, Undertaker Triple H. There's always something in those
Yeah,
ones where the rest of the card wasn't great, but they'd be like, oh, there's a really good Kurt Angle match, or there's a really good Shawn Michaels match, or a really good Undertaker match.
yeah.
These ones early on, other than, a few exceptions, the work rate wasn't close to what it would become for WWF, eventually. So you don't even have now WrestleMania 10, you got the ladder match, you got Brett versus Owen. So there's some really quality there. So it's not like 1 year later they couldn't have had better quality matches, because they did have some work rate, even if it wasn't as high as it would get,
Hmm.
a few years later. So
Yeah,
from that standpoint, you're kind of looking and you're like, well, Shawn Michaels could have had a better match than he had. Bret Hart could have had a much better match than he had. I'd even say Bob Backlund at that point in his career could have had a better match than he had. So yeah, there's not a lot of positives to say, but you know, that's
so
our job, right?
you brought up WrestleMania 10, and
Yeah.
Wade brings that up in his newsletter. So it's edition 328. That's one of the perks of being a VIP member, by the way. You can go back and review the old newsletters. He was writing below the bottom line, and basically he would cover pay-per-views in that and other things going on. And he talked about, this following WrestleMania 10, and it had a lot to follow on that show. And when you look at the talent that they had, they're really, and it's funny because you look Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Bret Hart, Bob Backlund, um, Lex Luger, British Bulldog, Bam Bam Bigelow, Undertaker, King Kong Bundy. You're like, oh, they had all those guys? What should have been a great show.
Shawn Michaels and Owen Hart you didn't mention in that.
Yeah,
They're
Sean and Owen. Yeah. Sean, Owen, Yoke, you had Yokozuna. You're like, what do you mean it wasn't a good show? It should have been a great show. And I wonder, yes, did people weigh it up against WrestleMania 10, which was very highly regarded? Was it just kind of, and I think we touched on this offline, the presentation of the characters. Actually, well, my mic might have been muted at that point, so let me just repeat myself. The presentation of the characters, we were still kind of in cartoony character mode. I mean, let's be honest, Kevin Nash as Diesel, I'm not sure that he was actually cool, even though they were trying to tell us he was Big Daddy cool. Like, one thing, when you're trying to be cool, don't tell me that you're cool. Let me
Yeah,
figure it.
we touched on that a little bit, I think, with our was that the Rumble or the Survivor Series
I
talk
think
last year?
yeah.
How he was cool as a heel, and they watered him down too much
Yeah.
as a babyface. And
Yeah.
and this we'll get to it. The match, the reaction for him was much more tepid than I would have guessed.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I was kind of, I haven't watched that match since, what are we, 30 years ago,
Yeah.
And I will also say, last time I mentioned right at the end that I had some technical issues with WrestleMania 11, which always clouded my thing. I'll just throw out there, at the time, I tried to order it, and our cable company would not let us order the pay-per-view because they claimed we hadn't paid our last bill.
Oh God.
And so my dad had to go in person like on Monday and like work it out. So I had to tape Raw, watch the replay on Tuesday, and then like watch Raw. So like I just remember at the time being like so excited and then being so let down. I mean, I was 15, so excited. Oh, it's WrestleMania. Then I couldn't order it. I was so angry, so let down, having to wait a couple days, and then being kind of like, this is what I was waiting for,
Yeah.
2 days for.
Exactly.
But again, I think my view on it at the time was probably less negative than it is looking back on it. Just again being 15 versus 45 and having some more perspective. Whereas WrestleMania 9, in the moment, I was just like, this is crap. So,
Well, Justin, my buddy, longtime friend Justin, by far the worst WrestleMania 11. Him and I have talked about that numerous times, and I can't argue with him. I mean, that's not a sentiment. I'm not going to defend it to anybody, but I could also see why 9. I mean, I avoided 9. I'll be honest with you. I avoided it. I was looking at it 2 years ago. I was going to do it, and I'm just like, which, why the hell am I doing this one if I didn't do 9? I mean, Jesus, at least 9 had, what the hell did it have? That ending with
it had nothing. And 9 actually, probably, I think one of my big issues with 9 is it looked better on paper, other than, Giant Gonzalez. But
oh God,
every match in 9 had am I allowed to swear on this?
yes,
Allowed to, a shitty finish.
Yeah.
It was like a count out, a disqualification, using chloroform.
Oh dear Lord.
2 doinks, fake arms. And even the matches that had like Luger perfect, it's a roll-up finish. It's a pin. It's one of the few pins on the show, and it's a roll-up finish.
Right.
And then you get the big spot after the match with the knockout from the forearm. After the match, you get the whole Hogan BS ending, and it's just, to me, there's nothing redeemable about that show. And I think we'll find at least 1 or 2 redeemable things about this show, which again is not high praise.
and Wade also talks about in Below the Bottom Line that you had clean finishes, with the exception of the Intercontinental title match, which of course we'll talk about. So, it's funny how that, steers your judgment a little bit. I mean, the first thing you bring up about 9 is the crappy finishes, which is completely legit.
Right.
And this is something that Justin brings up. Had to be the first Mania that had 0 big pay-per-view feel. I agree with Justin on this, because the matches, it's funny, if you go match by match, there's not a lot of heat. There really isn't. I mean, there's storylines, but there really isn't. And we'll go match by match and talk about it. The heat is really on Lawrence Taylor and Bam Bigelow. Ironically, as it would be, 3 years later with WrestleMania 14. I mean, the heat is Stone Cold and Mike Tyson. It's not even Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels. It's Steve Austin and Mike Tyson.
Right.
So
yeah, That's fair. But I do think, again, LT's involvement gave it something.
Yeah.
And again, we can quibble with presentation, but the Michaels Diesel matchup was the culmination of a long story that felt like a WrestleMania main event, I think. Even if you were a little cooler on Diesel than we should have been,
Hmm.
it was something that they had been working towards from the previous summer. So those things, but it did get me thinking, even just like the first match, and I don't know if we want to move in to the first match. It reminded me that back then, and really all those WrestleManias, and I'm guessing if you look at 12, 13, it continues for a while where there's just, and maybe, this is the start. We're about to get to the first In Your House, right? After this.
Hmm.
Back then, you're talking about 4 and then 5 pay-per-views a year. So it was a little different feel, but you just have like a random tag match. Forget WrestleMania. Nowadays, you would say that doesn't belong on, WWE's 10th biggest pay-per-view of the year. But if you look at WrestleMania 5, 6, 7, there's always those kind of matches. And then you think about it, you're like, well, they didn't have a pay-per-view in between the Rumble and Mania. They didn't have, and even at this point in 95, the days of Saturday Night's Main Event are over, I believe.
Oh, long over. Yeah.
Right? They've been
Couple of
gone for a
years.
few years,
Hmm.
so you've got Raw and you've got pay-per-views is basically what you're talking about. So maybe you could forgive a little bit where you say, oh, you got some of these matches that just don't feel like what we would consider a pay-per-view quality match now.
Yeah.
And that's maybe 30 years ago, you feel a little differently in the moment than looking back on it, where you're just kind of like, really? The Blue Brothers versus,
Versus Lex Luger and the British
Lex Luger
Bulldog.
and
Yeah, yeah, and
Bulldog.
we'll get into that. We'll get into
Yeah.
we'll get into what Wade thought was going to happen. He had been previewing the show. Just going into what you're talking about with pay-per-view. So the opening match is Bret Hart against Hakushi at the first In Your House. And even that nowadays, there's going to be a personal feud behind that, something going on, some kind of stip, or that takes place on like the SmackDown before Mania, something
Right.
like that. You go to In Your House. I'll just go quickly, and then we'll get to this WrestleMania. In Your House 2, right? So In Your House 1 is May. In Your House 2 is July. We go to that pay-per-view. You open with okay, so it's the Roadie against the 1-2-3 Kid. Men on a Mission against Razor Ramon and Savio Vega. I mean, we're gonna have to, when we get to all these shows, we'll rehash what went on. But as time goes on, with these shows, I think you start to see a transition to more meaningful matches. And Wade talks about that too. He talks
Yeah.
about that. He talks about that with the Sid Shawn angle, which we'll get to when we get to that match. Let's go ahead though, John. Let's get into the show. If I could pull up my notes, and there they are. We'll get to that when we talk about the show. Okay, so this takes place on April 2nd, 1995 in the Hartford Civic Center in Hartford, Connecticut. It is now the XL Center. It was home to the very popular Hartford Whalers for you NHL fans. It was the home of the Whalers for many years until they moved to Carolina to become the Hurricanes. It currently hosts the Hartford Wolfpack. Listen to me, Wolfpack. Not the NWO Wolfpack, the minor league affiliate of the New York Rangers. Sweet. Many pro wrestling events here, including the 90s Survivor Series, which saw the debut of The Undertaker. Now, this is a quick story. I actually could have went to the 2019 Money in the Bank. All right. I actually had the layover. I had the trip on my line. We were laying over. We were staying in the Hilton, which was attached to the Excel Center. Like you go in the hotel and there's a walkway to the Excel Center. And, at the time, weekends off were a premium. If you could get them, you took them. So I took it. and I ended up taking my family to the Ducks game, which I don't regret. Watching that show, boy, am I glad I didn't go, because that's the one where Brock Lesnar comes in.
Okay.
That's the one where Mustafa Ali
kills Mustafa Ali.
Yup, he was going to win Money in the Bank, and then Lesnar shows up, not in the match, and just grabs it, and yep, that's your Money in the Bank winner. How did I stay with this promotion, John? I don't know what the.
Well, I'll say the last WWE show I went to was TLC 2018. So just December.
Oh, yeah.
December 2018. That's just what, 7 months before.
Yeah.
And that was the show where Rollins and I started to say Moxley, Ambrose got booed out of the building.
Oh, yeah.
In San Jose.
Yeah.
But overall, it was actually a pretty good show.
Yeah.
That match, that was the culmination, was the Asuka, Charlotte, Becky TLC match that Ronda Rousey came out and pushed Becky and Charlotte off. Asuka wins the title to set up what would ultimately be the WrestleMania, main event. And, that was the last show I went to live. And I remember at the time being like, hey, other than the Ambrose Rollins snooze fest, which is just amazing given them.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Because that also had Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles. That was a pretty good show overall, but it was an interesting one because of the booze and everything. But yeah, then you get the Lesnar stuff, and it's just like, right? Did that leave to Kofi?
That was after Kofi was already champion.
Okay. I'm trying to think of who Lesnar would have cashed in on at that.
Rollins.
Okay.
Rollins.
So, Well, I digress. we'll get to look back on TLC 2018 in 20 some odd years.
In 20 some odd years, yeah. I'll be retired at that point. All right. A little over 16,000 in the building, according to Wikipedia. According to WrestleNomics, 340,000 pay-per-view buys, and 261,000 domestic. It was an increase over the 225,000 that bought the Rumble. So people were interested. People were interested in the show. I wonder if some of that was Lawrence Taylor, New Yorkers, maybe. Who knows?
The Mania brand.
The Mania brand, that has something to do with it too. 80,000 decrease year over year from WrestleMania 10, though. So there is a dip. And we know that there's a dip in business in 1995. Your commentary team is Vince McMahon, Jerry the King Lawler, Howard Finkel's your ring announcer, Nicholas Totoro from NYPD Blue at the time does the Shawn Diesel match. Your interviewers are Todd Pettengill. We didn't get this, but Gorilla Monsoon did stuff for Coliseum Home Video. And you had Jim Ross, who was doing interviews after the match. He also co-booked the show, whereas previous Manias were co-booked by Pat Patterson. So a little bit of a change. Azan says 2019 was Hayes. Why Hartford of all places? I honestly think, Azan, probably just, what they anticipated with ticket sales. I think they wanted it in the Northeast with Lawrence Taylor being the featured act. They just did Madison Square Garden, which is kind of funny. Like, you could have made the argument where you could have done this a year before and you have it at Madison Square Garden. The problem was at LT, LT had just retired. Like, he played in 93. So he had just retired. I don't remember exactly when he made the decision to retire. So that's probably why, or maybe they weren't even thinking of it back then, but it would have made some more sense to do it at MSG,
Now, Hartford's not, you know way better than I. Hartford's pretty close to NYC, right? It's not.
It is it's so funny. I was in a limo from Hartford to New York yesterday on my trip. It's about a 3.5 hour drive.
Okay.
I shouldn't say that. It's about 3 hours, but then you hit traffic, whatever.
Sure.
It could make it 3.5, 4. So
They
it is
honestly could have,
drivable.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
if it had been somewhere like in New Jersey, it could have been a little closer to his fan base, maybe.
Yeah.
But who knows? But they plan these things so far in advance, they may not have even had LT on the radar when they booked Hartford. It's hard to know.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah, who knows? Like I said, I think they're just trying to they knew they weren't going to put, people in a big show, and I think they were trying to stay close to home. I mean, the other factors too, like at the time the Devils were playing in the Brendan Byrne Arena, the Meadowlands, that might not have been available. So it's just a matter of availability. And,
Yeah.
to your point about the location, I mean, most of the fan base can get to Hartford pretty easily. So, and there's, you fly into Windsor Locks Airport, and that's only about a 40-minute drive from the, from the airport.
Yeah.
Justin, wrestling was not as popular at the time as well. Yeah, I mean, it was fading off. It was fading off. Even if Hulk Hogan was, at WCW, that promotion did not feel rejuvenated at all.
No, not yet.
Not yet. I'm shocked. I shouldn't say I'm not shocked, because watching the programming now, watching the pay-per-views, I could see why it didn't do as well. All right, so one thing, and we'll just cover this now. There were a lot of audio issues on the show. There's several cases. Like at one point, they try to cut back to Nicholas Turturro to interview Pamela Anderson. They can't even get the mic to work. They tried to do it like after the upcoming match. And Vince actually makes a comment. He goes, yeah, well, maybe our crack audio team could work on it. Like, he was pissed. He was pissed.
Understandably so.
I don't blame him. I don't blame him. I mean, I don't know who that's on. I mean, ultimately it's his gig, but he's got to, somebody's got to take care of that for him. You can't have the ball. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Vince isn't going to be back there plugging.
He can't be plugging in. Right. He can't be playing with plugs back there. So, celebrities, let's get this out of the way. You had Pamela Anderson, of course, and the mystery that they weaved throughout the show was, where was Pamela Anderson? And that gets revealed in the Diesel Shawn match. Jonathan Taylor Thomas from Home Improvement, Nicholas Turturro from NYPD Blue, Jennifer McCarthy, not Jenny, Jennifer McCarthy.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, that's how they introduced her. Mrs. Donnie Wahlberg now. And Salt and Pepper, who was Salt and Pepper, not
Salt
Pepper.
and Pepper.
Pepper.
Salt and Pepper.
And they showed them like all up in Bret Hart's business, and Bret's like, oh, this is cool, I'm thinking to myself watching this, I'm like, was this before Sunny Days there, Bret?
Yeah. He doesn't shy away from stuff in his book.
No. And then all the NFL players that will be in LT's corner. And I had a little problem with one of them, that how they portrayed him, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Well, I texted you when I was rewatching this. I said, it's all about celebrities.
Yeah.
But I was actually talking, and I don't know if this was on the show live originally or if this was just part of the kind of replay, but the video on the 10-year history of WrestleMania that started the show, at least that's how it is on Peacock.
Yeah.
And they show a little clip from all 10 WrestleManias. I don't think they showed a single wrestler.
No.
I mean, it was.
Well, you know what it was?
Aretha Franklin, and it was Ray Charles, and it was Run DMC, and it was all of those people, Muhammad Ali, all of the celebrities, and it kind of took me back. And I remembered at some point they stopped featuring, and they didn't have like really any celebrities at a WrestleMania, and the justification at the time was, our superstars are the celebrities. Like, we don't need, celebrities at WrestleMania anymore. And I kind of remember thinking, nah, you just couldn't book anyone.
Well, that, and to your point about showing history, like basically everybody that was a hallmark of previous WrestleManias was gone. I mean, Hogan's over in WCW, Savage is over in WCW. They're not going to acknowledge those guys. Andre's dead. I mean, so it's just like, I think with this one, the sense that I got and what Wade was reporting in the Torch was that Vince was looking to move forward.
Sure.
And I don't blame him. I don't blame him, in that sense anyway. couple of quick comments here. Fishbone was supposed to sing the national anthem. By the way, I don't even know who sang the national anthem because I didn't hear who the singer was. I barely heard it.
It was a Special Olympian.
Oh yeah. That's it. That's exactly.
I
Yeah.
didn't hear the introduction, but I kind of looking and not to be stereotypical, but I'm like, that looks like somebody, a special needs young person.
Yes, that's
And
you're
I,
right.
I looked it up myself out of curiosity because I had not heard because of the audio issues, but it was a Special Olympic athlete, and that's cool. You don't
Yeah.
have to,
Yeah,
but
no,
yeah,
it's appreciated when they do that. It really is.
sure.
It is appreciated. Derek, the only positive standout matches from the show are Razor and Jeff Jarrett, Sean versus Razor and Jarrett match, and Sean versus Diesel. Sean and Diesel is one of my favorite David versus Goliath style matches. LT and Bam Bam is fine. So, Derek, with some positivity on, and that's fair. I mean, that's a fair assessment. Bert,
I think it means Brett.
yeah, I think and just just look at his current wife. Okay. Let's get to the matches. We're not going to, John, we're not going to get too crazy with this move happened, then this move happened, then this move happened. We'll just hit the highlights and more so the booking as we go through the show. So you were alluding to the opening match. It's the Allied Powers, Lex Luger and the British Bulldog, taking on the Blue Brothers, Jacob and Eli with Uncle Zebekiah. For those of you keeping score at home, the Blue Brothers eventually become the Harris Brothers in WCW, and I skipped a gimmick, Skull and 8 Ball.
Skull and 8 Ball.
In DOA, yes, and the Gang Wars coming in a couple of years. They're also Creative Control, which was a shot at Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe. Uncle Zebekiah, you might know as Zeb Coulter, more infamously Dutch Mantel. This goes 6.5 minutes. It is won by the Allied Powers. So one of the Blues tries a pile driver on Luger, conveniently in the corner. Bulldog kind of comes off the, I think it was the second rope with the top with a sunset flip and just pins him. It looked like he kicked out, but they really didn't even have the. Okay, it's not just me, right?
He 100% kicked out. I mean, if he didn't kick out at 2 3/4, it was right at 3.
Yeah.
And I noticed, I put in my notes, Bulldog seemed surprised.
Yeah.
And he wasn't as celebratory, at the end, getting his hand raised. So I'm wondering if that was not a botched finish, because why are you protecting the Blues against Bulldog and Luger, of all people, who both have big established finishing moves? Like, why are you doing a roll-up finish on this match of all matches? It doesn't make any sense. So whether he was upset because it was a botched finish, or he was upset because Blue did a kick out at 3, which is always, I think, a cheap way of being like, oh, he barely beat me. So he definitely seemed upset about something, but
yeah.
The match was perfectly fine with a kind of weak and odd finish. That would be my assessment.
And it's kind of odd because your tag division at this point, I mean, what's your tag division? Your tag division is the Smoking Guns. Well done. We're about to, crown new champs in Owen Hart and Yokozuna, but that's a matter of convenience. Men on a Mission, the Head Shrinkers, they got one foot out the door, after what's his name's poisonous food or whatever. And you got the Barbarian playing a head shrinker, right? Playing a Samoan.
Yeah. And you've got, Mabel about to go single. So really,
Mabel's
Men
going
on
to
a
go
Mission
single.
isn't long for the world as a tag.
Yeah.
So it makes some sense to stick some singles guys together to create a tag team.
Yeah.
It's just why, and I mean, I could be wrong, but I thought they said that this was Allied Powers' debut match.
So it is their debut match on TV. They
TV.
do work a house.
Okay. But on TV, I don't count house shows, Frank.
Right.
So on TV, so TV, like, this is the start. And again, you're talking about former Intercontinental Champion, former multiple-time tag champion, former WrestleMania headliner. I mean, if you count, I'll give Luger the the double main event from 10. I'll count that as a main event. He at least headlined a SummerSlam. I mean, you're not talking about two low card or even mid card guys. These are two upper mid card, upper card wrestlers.
Yeah.
Put them together, make them a big tag team, and have them start out with a weak roll up finish. It just boggles my mind if that was really indeed the planned finish and not a botch.
Yeah. And that's the idea. What Wade was talking about was that they would likely get a title match, which kind of makes some sense. I mean, if now when he writes this report on WrestleMania, there was no pwtorch.com at the time, so he's already got the results. He already knows what happens in the Owen Yokozuna match. So that was his thinking, was that Luger and Bulldog would get that title match. It doesn't happen until a couple of pay-per-views, though. So, because they're just kind of hanging around and beating jobbers and things like that. You bring up Luger and Bulldog getting put together, and I think we kind of talked about that a little bit when we covered the Rumble. It made some logistical sense to put them together, but it also kind of shows you like where Lex Luger was at the time. Like,
exactly.
I think if Luger was a bigger player, right, I think this entire card has changed.
Yeah.
I think this entire card has changed.
Yeah.
Like he might very well have been like, for example, had he turned heel, right, in the whole story with $1 Million Man, had he turned heel, maybe he's the guy that beats Brett. And then Brett wins the Rumble. You do Brett and Luger, and then you free everybody else up. You free up Diesel. You free up Diesel to team with LT against Bigelow and Shawn Michaels, so you're not I mean, I know that's not what they wanted to do, and as we close out the show, I had a problem rebooking this card because you really can't rebook it. It was the card that needed to be at the time based on the personalities involved. Right. Luger was dead as a doornail, and they had nothing for Bulldog to do. I mean, the only other thing I thought of with Bulldog was so. Wade had been speculating that Luger would face Tatanka, which makes some sense. I mean, they had a feud, and we really didn't have a blow-off.
Right.
Because they were working Raw. They did a house. They did one. I got it here in my notes. They did one where I think Chief Jay Strongbow was in Luger's corner, and that was on Raw. And they did that to let's see here. Okay, so they had an Action Zone match that ended in a double count out. And there was a 6 where Luger joined Men on a Mission before they turned heel. And Tatanka joined IRS and Bigelow. And then there was another one where Luger wins via count. So they were still working. So you never really had a resolve to their feud. Now, I know nobody's clamoring 30 years later for a payoff to Luger and Tatanka, but that might have more juice than this.
It was a story.
What's that?
It was at least a story.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And I think there were a lot of fans probably at the time thinking the same thing. Like, why didn't we get that match?
Right. And Bulldog, I thought about, you have to do a little elbow work, but maybe Bulldog is Owen's partner instead of Yokozuna. I mean, Owen and Bulldog is, as we would see in a couple of years, is a much better team.
Yeah.
Actually, not that far from this point, because Bulldog turns the end of the year. That's a much better team. But then what do you do with Yokozuna? You got nowhere to put Yokozuna. You're not doing singles with him because he's too fat.
Yeah. He's at that point where he just needed this.
You gotta hide him in a tag team.
Yeah.
So that's why we were where we were. So, but anyway, I would probably, my resolution to all that was, if we're doing a rebook, Luger against Tatanka, Bulldog and Brett against Backlund and Jerry Lawler, because Bulldog and Brett were teaming and they were working Lawler and Owen. Now you can't use Owen because Owen's going for the tag titles. So who needed to see another Brett Backlund match? Jerry Lawler was talking crap, and Jerry and Brett had the history. Slop them all together instead of having Roddy Piper ask 100 times, "What do you say? What do you say?" I couldn't. It was embarrassing, you know. So, and then I'm
Yeah,
putting, and then I'm trying to build some tag teams. So you still had the head shrinkers on the roster. You might as well use them. Let them face the Blue Brothers and let the Blue Brothers win. At least you have a contender.
sure.
So
Yeah,
it's not a great rebook, but it's something. So,
yeah.
um, anything? The only other thing on the match I did notice they did do a switcheroo at one point. The Blue Brothers. I don't know
Oh,
if you caught that. Yeah. So I was
I
thinking
don't
about the
think I
killer.
was paying enough attention.
Yeah, they did the switcheroo.
You gotta
I don't
love the
remember them
switcheroo.
doing that much in matches, and quite frankly, I barely remember the Blue Brothers anyway. So,
Yeah.
um, all right. Wade's rating on this: a star and 3/4. Quote: not bad, but hardly an electric opener and void of any symbolism that times have changed at the WWF as Luger and Bulldog posed in the ring after the victory.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, yeah. Um, Still wants that Hogan must pose thing.
Sure.
All four worked hard. It appears Luger and Bulldog are headed for tag title matches against the new tag champs. So, in that sense, in real time, that would have made some sense to me. You know,
Sure.
especially with Yoko and Owen winning the titles later. Those two feuding makes some sense. So
Yeah.
there is that. All right. I mentioned the audio issues when they cut back to Nicholas Turturro. Vince made his crack audio team comment. We then go to match 2. Razor Ramon with the 1-2-3 kid in his corner against Jeff Jarrett, your Intercontinental Champion, with the roadie, Mr. Road Dog, Jesse James, eventually. So, John, we covered the Rumble 95 with Jarrett beating Razor Ramon after that match ended in a countout. Jarrett had goaded him. Razor gets back in. He can't do the Razor's Edge. Razor just falls, and Jarrett pins him with a small package. So this is a continuation of that. This goes 13 and a half minutes. Razor wins it via a DQ. So the finish of the match is Razor is going for the Razor's Edge. There was a little bit of interference beforehand, you know, that Jarrett had pulled Kid by his nuts on the post. Rhodey had grabbed Razor Ramon as he was trying the Razor's Edge, and Razor falls out of the ring. So he had a little bit of interference already, but he just clips him in the knee, and that's the end of the match. Wade has this at 3. Quote, a really good match. Lost a quarter star for the non-finish. And then Kid's kicks and Rhodey's bumps were during the post-match ruckus. What I'll say before I turn over to you, John, is that it seemed like they liked the Intercontinental title matches around this time to have shenanigans, countouts, disqualifications. 1 is a countout. 2, Savage uses the ropes. 3, technically George Steele interfered and shoved Savage off the top, right? 4 is a countout, or 4 is a DQ, right? 5, Warrior and Rude. Heenan interferes, holds down Warrior's leg. 7, there's a count out with, or I think it's a DQ actually with Bossman and Perfect.
Mhm.
9, Michaels is counted out
Count
against
out.
America. So this just seemed to be the title that you just would not. It was always, okay, we want to keep the title on blank, but we want the other person to win. So this is how we're going to get out of it.
Yeah, and of course that was also a perfect gimmick for Jarrett because as that kind of Weasley heel with the roadie in his corner, always able to help him out, do that stuff. So yeah, I mean, part of what WWEF has historically done is had lame finish, like say the War Raiders getting disqualified against the New Day on a Monday Night Raw to set up a rematch at a pay-per-view where you expect then to get a clean finish. And it's not what I would consider good booking,
Mm-hmm.
but you're kind of used to it.
It's
In
baked
this
in.
case, isn't this even a worse finish than what they did at the Royal Rumble? Like the Rumble finish didn't even lead to a better finish at WrestleMania. And again, to Wade's comments, yeah, the match itself. I mean, it's Jarrett and Razor. They're going to have a good, not great, but they're going to have a good match against each other. My one note for the match was I think it's the most pin attempts per minute in wrestling history,
Oh Lord.
especially the first, what did you say it goes about 13? I'd say the
Yeah.
first like 8 minutes. I mean, it was like all these roll up attempts, and I'm like, at least they're showing urgency. And but it was also just like clothesline, pin attempt, punch, pin attempt, schoolboy, pin attempt, backslide, pin attempt, reverse backslide, another pin attempt. It was crazy how many pin attempts.
And how
But
fast the referee was counting.
oh, I had that in my notes. Faster counts just across the board, it seemed. I don't remember saying that when we covered the Rumble or Survivor Series the year before. Maybe it didn't strike me for whatever reason, but here maybe it's just generational or era. But anyways, it was lots of pin attempts. The other thing that stood out is like 1, 2, 3 Kid. What is he? The worst corner man in history. I mean, at one point he basically just like got in the ring and was about to beat up
Yeah.
Jarrett. Like, how is that helping
How is
your,
that going to help? You're going to get Razor
you're gonna get
disqualified.
Razor disqualified.
Yep. Yep.
So, and then he failed to keep Rhodey from interfering, and that's really what he was there for. And then he ends up getting beat up after the match.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, this was not a banner night for Sean Waltman in any stretch of the imagination. But again, good effort, good match, enjoyable, lame finish, which is especially galling at WrestleMania, especially when it's a rematch from a lame finish at Royal Rumble. What are we doing here?
So let me ask you this now that you bring that up. Um, is there an argument to flip the matches? Is there an argument to have chicanery at the Rumble? I mean, not that I want to book chicanery, but this is what we're working with. You have that at the Rumble, and then you have what you did. Because, like you said, the Rumble finish wasn't as bad. Jarrett goads him into restarting the match. All right, there's a little bit of egregiousness that, you could just restart it, but, all right, it's the referee's decision, whatever, you know what I mean? So, um, is there an argument for that? Because technically, that is a finish. Razor fails on the Razor's edge, and Jarrett's your champion. And now you can have Razor chase Jarrett
I,
instead
I,
of a.
yeah, I think that switching them does make a lot of sense. And uh, yeah, and to your point, Jarrett with cheating and without cheating was working on Razor's leg,
Yeah,
knee during that match. So the payoff comes at least because of the work done in the match. Whereas this, there's no payoff at all.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, and we're going to be covering these pay-per-views. They do end up flipping the titles. Like I think Razor wins it, but then Jarrett wins it 2 days later, and this is kind of where the hot potato stuff starts. This to me is the point where I think we start to lose the Intercontinental title.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Because and I can tell you, if I can name every Intercontinental champion from '86 to about this year. And
Yeah.
this is the year where, because yeah, you come the late '90s, you got your Rock and you got your Triple H and you got your Stone Cold, and Shawn gets a cup of coffee with it, and I get all that, but this is
You,
where
you start to get over the next couple years, Goldust, Dean Douglas, Jarrett multiple times,
yep,
and then it goes. You got Ahmed Johnson, I think, wins it for a minute. You get Mark Mero win it at some point. I mean, you're talking about that
yeah, I
94 to
think he does.
96
Yeah,
stretch. It,
Shamrock later on, and
yeah, I mean, it just it
China.
right, and it just. I think you're right. It really starts pretty soon after this that you're just gonna hot potato it and eh, it starts to lose its luster. And of course, there was always that workman's, kind of reputation, right? That
Yeah.
you're not looking forward to a work rate match with Hogan or Warrior,
No.
even though they could have good matches every once in a while, but you were looking forward to a Bret Hart match. You were looking forward to a Shawn Michaels match. You were looking forward to a bulldog, not a bulldog, Macho Man, Savage,
Savage Steamboat, Savage
Steamboat.
Tito, I mean,
Right.
all of those guys. Yeah,
I mean,
Ahmed gets a cup of coffee with it. Mero has a cup of coffee with it. Triple H, and then we sling it around. Owen actually holds it for a while in
yeah.
1997. He held it longer than I thought.
But
And just
those
want to
are
bring up,
fewer and far between, right?
yeah,
Those kind of reigns. And then eventually, by the end of the decade, they're doing the same thing with the world title, as we talked about, I think, last
yeah,
time. So it becomes ridiculous where at some point you put the title on somebody for 6 months and it felt like an eternity,
yeah.
you know? And
I mean, it
uh,
really it stopped probably with Gunther.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's probably a few. Jericho might have had a little bit of a longer one here or there, but yeah,
But even if he had it, John, even if he had it for a while, it never felt that way. Like it never, like the things that stick out to me in the late night. This is just off the top of my head. Rock and Triple H, the Euro Continental title
mm,
match at WrestleMania 2000. I think I covered that with Stout. Um, and then after that, it's a blur.
the Miz holds it 9 times eventually, and Jericho
Yeah,
holds it 8 or 9 times,
it,
and
it's a blur. It's not like there's nothing really. There's no real memorable in my mind. IC title matches like except for the Rock and Triple H at Madison Square Garden.
is that the
You
ladder
know,
match?
the ladder match. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
the ladder
yeah,
match.
yeah, yeah. SummerSlam. Yeah, and also eventually they've introduced the U.S. title, which waters things down
Yeah,
also.
well, yeah, and that's yeah. We start getting into
So
the two title era. Yeah.
yeah,
Um. Oh yeah, for sure. I just want to give a couple of shouts here. Sean Plicht is in the room. Sean, always good to hear from you.
hey
Jarrett,
Sean, what's up?
what's up, buddy? Jarrett was always decent, but not much better. Match with Razor was pretty good overall. Finish, no doubt, took it down. Four Eyes Malone gives us a hi, and he and Sean looks like they know each other here. Azan, why book the match in the first place? You know, get Razor a win, keep the title on Jarrett, and keep the feud going.
Yeah,
That's the
you
way they
set up
did
a
it.
tag match with Razor and
Razor and Kid against
Kid
Brody and Jarrett.
against Rhodey and Jarrett.
Yep.
And it's what they did.
That's how it was done. It's just do the crappy finish to get you to come back. I mean, even my uncle would tell you going to Madison Square Garden all those years with Bruno, they would do matches where there'd be a DQ or something like that. And then they'd have to come back for a steel cage, like to settle a feud once and for all.
And you go to the classic NWA back in the day dusty finishes.
Oh, we
You
talked
know,
about that. Oh
you're
boy.
it's not like Vince was the only booker guilty of this
Yeah.
over the years. You get 11 people interfering and Moxley retains against Swerve.
Yeah.
It's even the best of times, right? I mean, you look at the Attitude Era, you look at the best of ECW, you look at the best of Monday Night War WCW. Don't tell me there's not a lot of crap in that
Oh,
in any of those periods. Pick your favorite period, you're gonna find things to complain about.
oh yeah.
So yeah, it's just that this was in an era when the booking was worse than usual and the wasted star power. Again, we're not talking work rate star power, but we're still talking star power. Where, to your point, you could have utilized all those guys we named at the beginning better.
Yeah.
And here you're just. The other thing to mention, which we didn't mention at the beginning, was this was a 2 hour and 25-minute WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And like that first match only going 6 minutes. I'm not saying it needed to be a 15-minute, but could you have gone 10 minutes? A lot
Mm.
of these matches are short. Even this one at 13 could have gone 16 or 17 and not, overstayed its welcome. Why was it a 2 hour and 25-minute show?
Yeah, I'm not
Um,
sure with the Hartford Civic Center at the time with their time constraints. I'm sure they wanted time for Salt and Pepper, which was not on the Peacock broadcast.
that's true. Yeah, you're right. That the 225, I guess, is not the official
Yeah,
live
and you want to
time, but
introduce the celebrities. Diesel celebrates after. So there's a lot of little factors involved. Real quick, I just want to run through these chats here. Did Bob Holly win? Azan, I looked it up. He did not.
I would have sworn he did.
I thought so too. I thought maybe he had a quick cup of coffee with it, but I'm just double checking. I just want to make sure I'm not. Yeah, this is now. He wouldn't have. I'm going into the 2000s here. I'm going through the list. I
Yeah,
don't.
no.
Yeah, I don't see it. Yeah, agreed, Azan, especially. So this is Sean talking to Azan if you're going to get that kind of finish. Yeah, I mean, like we talked about, get the heat on Jarrett, get Razor a win, get the fans to want to see Razor beat Jarrett. That's how they did it. Mid-90s wrestling is so weird. It's interesting how long it took WWE to finally shift its mentality of the times. Well, they had their hand forced. WCW also. I mean, this year, this is the year where I think lessons get learned, and they finally realize it took them a while, not right away. It took them a while, but a year later, things change. IC title was always my favorite belt in the Attitude Era. I mean, that's when they hot potatoed it, but I was a kid. I thought it was all legit. That's awesome. Thanks for the by the way, so far, thanks for the chats. Four Eyes Malone, Sean Plichter, Azan, Justin, everybody that's chatted so far. I really appreciate it. Sean Plichter, which was great. I'm thinking he's talking about. Oh, here we go. You have Santino winning as a fan. Yeah, okay. He's talking about the memorable moments. Santino winning as a fan. I mean, I talked about what stuck out to me, and I didn't mention that because it really didn't. That
That's
was
when
also
you're
a time
wiping from your memory.
from you. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a memorable time for me watching WWE, so I admit that. But yeah, I mean, Santino beating Umaga. I mean, this is why you didn't have stars for a while. I didn't watch this Mania till way later. It was different being in a normal size arena. Yeah, I mean that does stick out. And Sean also says great that the show was short. So yeah, it needed
Fair
to be
enough.
short, Sean. It needed to be short. All right, let's move along here. I don't think there's much else we have to talk about. We discussed the interference, talked about the quick falls. Yeah, we covered basically all the highlights. We'll talk about what happens because we're gonna, in your house, and we're gonna be reviewing all those shows. So we'll cover the what comes next. We finally get to Jim Ross talks to Jeff Jarrett as he's making his way back. JR says he should be ashamed of himself, and they finally go to Nicholas Totoro. They get to talk to him. He's in the $1 Million Corporation's locker room with Jenny McCarthy. And then Shawn Michaels and Sid walk in, and my notes are Sid yells like usual. But nobody could do it like Sid. Like, he's the one person that it doesn't bother me because that's him.
But Sid could also do really good with that quiet. He could go back and forth.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and that was
Yeah.
what made Sid, I think, better is that other end of the spectrum.
Yes. Yeah. Big Sid fan over here. Always loved him. And probably, not to digress too much, probably worked out for the best that he was in and out, with his softball or whatever else was going on, squeegee incidents, knife incident. It probably worked out for the best because he always felt special when he showed up.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
I think like if he was somewhere for a long period of time, you start to get, like anybody else, like even nowadays, like everybody just feels the same now. Nothing feels,
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. Let's promise not to spend too much time on this next match. It's Undertaker and King Kong Bundy. So this is a continuation of the feud with the $1 Million Corporation. We covered when IRS got involved at Survivor Series. They took the urn in the Undertaker IRS match at the Rumble. That sets up the feud with Bundy. 6 minutes. Undertaker wins it. Basically, Undertaker no sells an avalanche from Bundy. And then he body slams him. And like I'm watching it, I'm wondering if he was trying to hit the tombstone and just couldn't like set him up and just figured, all right, I'll just slam him. And then he came off the ropes and he did the flying clothesline for the pin. I mean, I maybe I'm just looking into it too much, but
I think so. I think he probably knew he couldn't do it. I remember sometime around this time there was a feature in a WWF magazine on the top finishers in
yeah,
the company. It was maybe a year later, and I remember they said we couldn't put Undertaker's tombstone on there because he can't hit it on guys like Yokozuna and King Kong Bundy. So
yeah.
the bigger guys, but he would usually do a choke slam as a finisher when he couldn't do a tombstone. So the flying clothesline kind of surprised me, was a little anticlimactic. And there was also a kick out at 3. I don't know if you noticed that Bundy lifted his shoulder at about 3.5.
I have to okay. I
Yeah.
have to rewatch that. But and I'm glad Sean says this here. Taker had gotten a little better at the time, but man, the opponents weren't that good. I'm not even sure Taker was all that great. I mean, he was better.
Better, but not there yet.
Taker's
Not
not good
not
until the mid 2000s.
yeah.
When he starts messing with Orton and Batista and Edge, when you start getting those matches, I think that's when you start to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one that always stood out to me, which would have been '01, was Triple H at 17. And I know a
Mm,
lot of that was a walk-in brawl, but that was, I think, a really good match.
yeah, and
Um,
Flair the
and
year later.
and I think the biker badass gimmick allowed him to free up his style. Even forget about the skill level, just the style was a little bit more freeing because he's not doing all the zombie sit-ups. He's not
Yeah.
doing all the slow stuff. But here,
In
yes.
hindsight, I couldn't stand that. I'll be honest. Well, the no selling, like even this with Bundy, like you're talking about one of the badass trash talking heels of the '80s. Okay,
But by
and
this time, he didn't mean
oh,
anything,
he didn't. No,
unfortunately.
he
Nothing.
didn't. And that's what Sean's talking about. Like this $1 million corporation. I hate to say it doesn't mean much, but also like if you're trying to give the Undertaker an opponent, that's the best opponent for him at a WrestleMania, and that says a lot.
Yeah,
Like you weren't going to do Kama, right? Because you don't want to put, I know
not
that's his
yet.
boy, him and Charles Wright, they're best friends. I get that, but you don't want to put Kama in that spot. King Kong Bundy actually makes some sense, but the
Yeah,
problem
and
is you're getting Bundy way after the fact.
yeah.
Okay, you're getting way after the fact, and Undertaker really isn't the Undertaker yet.
Yeah. And the streak wasn't a thing yet. Nobody had
No,
really caught on yet. So you get everything's about the urn. We steal the
that's the
urn
story.
back, and then during the match, it gets stolen back again by Kama. And this is the part that I had totally forgotten is that like he's interviewed by Jim Ross as he's leaving the ring with the urn while the match is still going.
Good call.
And he says, I'm going to melt it down and make a chain. And I mean, I remember that storyline, but I would not have guessed that he said it at that point so early. And then flash forward a little bit, all these guys are out there in Bam Bam's corner for the main event. You would
Mhm.
think now the booking the way they do, Taker would have come out and at least chased off Kama to try to get the urn back. Like, but there was just nothing. There was like no even mention of it. Like Bundy's out there, like he didn't lose to Undertaker earlier in the show. Like this
Yeah, that's a
match
good point.
didn't even exist by the time the
Yeah.
main event comes around.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was not good on really any level.
And I'm glad you brought up the urn, right? Because so the Undertaker gets the urn back. Doesn't it make more sense for the Undertaker to win the match, but then have the urn stolen? Because the urn gets stolen and he still wins. So why do I
So
care about
what's
why do I
why
care
do
about
I
the urn?
care about the urn? 100%.
It's like the whole thing with the stupid bracelet. I mean, with CM Punk with the bracelet recently. You know. Um. Okay. Not looking to talk about that match much more. Oh yeah, I'll give you Wade's half a star. Okay.
There you go.
Another athletically disappointing Undertaker match, although he carried out his gimmick well. Combined with his gimmick, if Undertaker were to be more explosive and versatile in the ring, he might mean more. Now I have in my notes, you got to wait about 10 more years, Wade.
Yeah.
Got to wait about 10 more years there, pal.
But he get there.
And then as it was, his match was just all sizzle, no steak, disappointment. And that's what a lot of these Undertaker matches, even in this time period, this year was just worse because it's just, and I hate to just like sit here and shit on things. I try to find and that's why I said this was probably the best opponent for him, but that says a lot. It says a lot about where we were, what the Undertaker was doing,
And that's okay. It's okay on a stronger card.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. It's the sum of the parts,
Right. And like you make the argument, could you make Undertaker champion? But then who's his opponent?
Yeah.
There's no opponent that makes sense for him except for these guys. And Bundy's going to get a world title match in 1995? Come on. All right. Well, these guys are champions coming up. It is the Smoking Guns, Billy and Bart Gunn. I wonder if Billy Gunn is still around. They take on Owen Hart and a mystery partner. Little did we know, we have Billy Gunn hanging around 30 years. Yeah. Owen Hart introduces, he says, the moment you've all been waiting for. He introduces a man that did what he always wanted to do, and that's beat Bret Hart for the world title, and that turns out to be Yokozuna. So real quick on the tag titles, we covered that 1, 2, 3 Kid and Bob Holly beat Tatanka and Bigelow in the finals of a tournament, only to lose the titles the next night to the Smoking Guns. That whole deal sets up the Bigelow LT feud. And I mentioned about Owen choosing Yokozuna. Wade had speculated, and I don't know why he would come to this conclusion. I'm not sure if the match was announced. He said that Bret could have been Owen's partner. Now, I don't know if the Bret Backlund match was introduced at the time, but if it wasn't, could you have made some sense out of that? It's interesting to think about because, like, you'd have to tell a story. Like, how the hell did we get here?
Yeah, because Bret was coming out in the Rumble, beating up Owen and beating up Backlund.
Right.
I don't think there was. I'd have to go back and watch the Raws leading up to it, but I don't remember anything to suggest that.
No, because they were still. I don't remember when the Bret Backlund match got announced. And this was this was edition 325. This was only about 3 editions before the edition that covered this pay-per-view. So,
or did he think Bret was going to pull double duty?
A double duty? Yeah.
Because if you go to the Bret Backlund match earlier in the show, Bret loses again and snaps in a way where he feels like he's got to get back with Owen to boost. Maybe that's the only thing I can think of, but no, that I don't think the ground was laid for that at all. So I don't know what way
that would have to be a story you would tell afterwards. That would have to be a story to tell afterwards. He said it also could be a member of the $1 Million Corporation. Tatanka, I don't know. I don't.
I don't think that would have made much sense.
Yeah. No, he said, but he did say the most credible is Yokozuna. And listen, at the time, it made a lot of sense. Number one, we talked about this before. You got to do something with Yokozuna. You got to hide him somewhere. You got to hide him in a tag team because you're not going to have him work singles. He's too heavy. He's 640 pounds at this point. What are you going to do with this guy?
Yeah, and at the time, I always liked the team. I liked the team of Owen and Yoko at the time. Yeah. Not even thinking about that stuff. It just kind of worked because Owen was so obnoxious, and he could hide behind Yoko,
Yeah,
kind of similar to the Shawn Diesel, dynamic from the year before. And so, I think it was a smart choice. Owen, I've talked about this. I don't know if I've talked about it with you or whatever, probably, but at one point, I think you and I ran down all the different tag teams that Owen was in over the years and his different partners. And it was clear, regardless of how fans or anyone else thought, Vince saw Owen as a tag team guy.
yeah,
So he was going to be with Bulldog, he was going to be with Brett, he was going to be with Neidhart, he was going to be with um, Coco Beware, he was going to be with Yoko, he was going to be with Jarrett.
yeah,
And that's the reality with little bits in between where you get the King of Hearts gimmick and later on you might get the Intercontinental title run when he's part of the New Heart Foundation. But that was the reality. And to your point, it was the perfect use of Yoko. And you can just see it in this match. Yoko hits, a leg drop and takes like 30 seconds to stand up.
yeah,
And he was always big, but if you rewind a few years, he was much more agile than now. So this is what you're going to do. You've got Owen to create the movement. You've got Owen to be obnoxious and to sell, and Yoko can come in, hit a couple big moves, tag back out, and Owen can come in and steal the glory, so to speak, if
yeah,
hit a sharpshooter or whatever. And you always have that bonsai drop, which was over with the crowd.
yeah.
It got a pop. So it's like it was a good use, and the match itself, I think, was pretty good for what you could get at that time with Yoko's involvement. Again, short, was it 6, 7 minutes? Um,
Yeah, so actually goes a little under 10.
okay,
With
a
the
little
finish, you
longer.
mentioned the bonsai drop. Yoko hits it on Billy. Bart saves him. Owen then tags in. He considers a sharpshooter, but he just pins Billy.
Yeah,
I thought that was a
that's
little
even
weird.
better. I love that because it just made so much sense in the moment.
Yep.
And I
And there was a
like the
little
fact that it kind of sells that bonsai drop is like he was done. I mean, and it was so long after it, but he was still done. That really sells the move in a way. I will say there was one botch earlier in the match. Owen reached up when one of the guns was running the ropes, like he was going to pull the rope down. And I think it was Bart Gunn just ran the ropes like normal. And then, like a minute later, Owen pulls the ropes down and he tumbles out. So if you watch that, I think Owen jumped the gun and got confused and went to pull the rope down earlier than he was supposed to in that sequence.
okay.
But a little bit of a botch there, but it's in the background, so a lot of people probably didn't even notice it. But otherwise, I think pretty good tag match. I think the Smoking Guns were a solid tag team, and for all of Billy Gunn's issues, he could throw a damn good drop kick.
Yes, he could.
And he probably still can. If I, with all the roids he's on, he's still in excellent shape. So,
Interestingly, Wade had this at a 2. Quote, Yoko's half-hearted celebration and eyeing of Owen may have been the subtle beginning of an eventual babyface turn. Now, watching it, I didn't get that from the post-match. I'd have to watch it again. Did
mm.
you get that feeling? Yeah, I
I
didn't get
didn't,
it.
I didn't notice it. I didn't
No.
notice it.
Like
Yeah.
I was looking for like a side-eye look or something, like maybe there was one point where it did, but I didn't feel it.
But I guess stealing the pin, but again, stealing the pin in this case is a little harsh of a, you know, phrasing because it, stealing a pin is if Yoko hits the bonsai drop, then Owen tags in. But in this case, he hits the bonsai drop, there's a breakup of the pin, and then
Yeah,
he comes in. So I didn't notice anything, but we know it eventually goes in that direction, right? So,
it does.
um, yeah.
Uh let's see a couple of Four Eyes. I was just about to ask where Yoko was then. So Yoko had been given time off. I think they wanted him to lose weight, and it just didn't happen. So, all right, we'll bring you back. We'll put you in a tag team. Ironically, now according to Wikipedia, and I've heard this outside of that as well. Brett has talked about where Owen and Neidhart were going to win the tournament, and they were going to be the tag champs.
Mm-hmm.
But then Neidhart got fired for no showing events. So, that would have been the real, knife at Brett's, back, winning the tag titles with his former partner.
Yeah.
And you
that
wonder,
makes a lot of sense.
I wonder, now that I bring that up, if Owen and Neidhart won the tag titles, do you get Owen and Neidhart against Brett and Bulldog at Mania and skip the whole Bob Backlund nonsense?
I mean, yeah, that's certainly much more intriguing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because whereas we're about to talk about, Bret Hart and Bob Backlund was not. All right. Nicholas Totoro says that he can't find Pamela Anderson, and they've made celebrity changes. So we find that out in a little bit. I Quit between Bret Hart and Bob Backlund with a surprise special guest referee. We did not know this. It was Roddy Piper. Second straight year, Roddy Piper refereeing a Bret Hart match. So we know the history with this. Backlund had beaten Bret for the WWF Championship at Survivor Series via Owen Hart throwing in the towel. Backlund then goes on to lose it to Diesel, but then the feud gets furthered, as you mentioned, at the Royal Rumble. Owen and Backlund attack Bret during his attempt to regain the title from Diesel, and then Bret attacks both Owen and Backlund during their Rumble appearances. 9.5, or about 9.5, very long minutes. Bret wins this. So the finish happens. Bret actually reverses a crossface chicken wing, and he applies it to Backlund. Roddy yells, "What do you say? What do you say?" I think about 2, 3, maybe 10 times. And Backlund does. I don't know about you. I didn't hear Backlund say "I quit."
He didn't. I think he said yes. Like, I think he just said yes.
Or it might have been like, yeah, like,
yeah. Yeah, it was hard. Yeah, no. There was exactly one good moment in this match. And
it ended?
No.
Oh.
It was, well, but no, legitimately good. At one point, Bret had Backlund in a submission, not a big submission. I don't remember what it was, some kind of maybe arm submission.
Mm-hmm.
And Piper goes to Backlund and says, "Do you give up?" And he says, "No." And he pulls the microphone and then he puts it up to Bret. He's like, "Do you give up?" And Bret just kind of looks at him, is like, "No."
Like, what are you doing?
I laughed out loud because it's Piper being Piper. I think that was a genuine moment between Piper and Bret where Piper was trying to break Bret, and Bret almost broke, but he didn't. He held it together. But that was, and I again, I don't remember this match being so bad. Maybe just 15-year-old me, and it was new, the gimmick, with the microphone.
I think
and, you've gotten that "I quit" gimmick now with the wire. And that's the other thing, was the wired microphone.
Yeah.
But the wireless microphones, the problem with "I quit" matches now is that they've gotten to the point where they don't actually end on a submission hold.
Mm-hmm.
The person quits because they've gotten beat up too much, or they quit because the heel is going to beat up their girlfriend, or there's all these stupid things. But at the time, it was a
novelty. Champion is going to beat up the heel's brother in a cage.
Yeah. So the novelty, or you got to protect Melina from Ric Flair. And so anyways, the novelty of the "I quit" match at the time, I think, carried it maybe in the time for me as a fan, as opposed to now looking back on it. Mm-hmm. But again, how are you going to do an "I quit" match and not have the guy actually say "I quit"?
Yeah.
It's
Especially it's your
it's
first match. It's
it's
your
your
first of its
first
kind.
one.
Yeah.
And the other thing I noticed at one point, I don't remember who, early on in the match, one of them had the other in a hold using the ropes.
Hmm.
And he's over there asking, "Do you quit? Do you quit?" Later, Brett's got Backlund in a hold, and Backlund gets to the ropes, and Piper calls for the rope break.
Yeah.
So they didn't even have that consistency within the match of whether the ropes caused a break, because the first time they didn't, the second time they did. So there's no consistency. You don't get the actual "I quit." So the match just fell flat. And if you had asked me last week, what do you remember about this match? I would have said, I remember Backlund going crazy and yelling about seeing the light afterwards.
Yeah.
So I don't even remember much. I did not remember that it was on the reverse chicken wing. Nothing about the match really stood out after all these years.
Yeah.
So yeah, not a good match. And the "I quit" microphone gimmick really took away from it in a big way, I think.
Justin in the chat, Brett wins the yeah match because that's basically how Backlund said it, and you don't have a botch like that at WrestleMania. I mean, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, this is your signature event, you know. Um, yeah, I had the same issues you did, with the uh, with Piper asking about do you quit? What do you say? I kind of had that same issue. The other issue I wanted to bring up, the heat between these two. Like, it didn't feel like the heat was always Brett and Owen. And that's
Mm,
where the heat was in their match at Survivor Series. I mean, yeah, they heated up at the Rumble, when Brett gets involved, and attacks Backlund or whatever, but I don't remember even watching the TV. I don't remember this, feud needing an ultimate payoff. Like, it just felt like, okay, we got to get Brett his win back. So how do we do it? And we do it in an "I quit" match, which made some logistical sense. I don't want to say it didn't make sense. It made some sense, but the heat was never Brett and Bob Backlund. The heat was always Brett and Owen.
yeah, I think that's fair, but I still think you could do this match, make it a more traditional submission match,
Yeah,
and not have the microphone gimmick, which took away. And
I think
then,
that hurt it a lot. I think
yeah,
that hurt it a
and
lot. Yeah,
because, their match at Survivor Series, the wrestling quality was significantly better than this. They
yeah,
clearly had better match in them against each other.
yeah,
So I'm okay with the story. I'm okay with the booking. I get what you're saying about the heat not being as hot as it could have been, but I'm okay with that. I still think you could have had a better match,
yeah.
and we wouldn't be as down on it if they had delivered. And if I think if you ask Brett, he would not disagree with anything we're saying.
Yeah, and let me just say, I'm when I talk about the heat between these two, that's not my reason not to do it. I'm not saying don't do the match. What I'm saying is it never felt like a feud that it just didn't. The heat was somewhere else, And but the thing is, you weren't gonna do another Brett Owen match, because you had already done a bunch of them on pay-per-view already, so you weren't gonna do it again. So they were still trying to keep Brett in that orbit, and they're still trying to keep Owen in Brett's orbit. If you think about it, with Owen teaming with Yokozuna and listen to me, Brett facing the guy that beat him for the title due to Owen. They're trying to keep them in the same
Sure.
sphere,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, and but on the positive side, it didn't go too long, and you got to where you needed to go with Backlund because he was doing his presidential campaign after this. So that's where that went. All right, we got to move this along. Time is becoming of the essence. Todd Pettengill interviews Diesel. At one point, I felt like he kind of like fumbled through the interview, but he got through it. Diesel interviews just don't age well. Like, I watch these things and I'm just like, the Kevin Nash from WCW is a lot more genuine and a lot easier to watch than the Diesel.
100%.
Yeah. They announce Nicholas Totoro as the guest ring announcer for the next match, and Jonathan Taylor Thomas as the guest timekeeper. Your WWF title match is Diesel defending against Shawn Michaels. So this was set up via Shawn winning the Rumble, and Diesel was the champion. And happened so that these two had split up at Survivor Series. We covered that. Diesel was Shawn Michaels' bodyguard for about a year and a half before they split up, and they had been working on this since SummerSlam. Shawn comes out with Jenny McCarthy and Sid, his bodyguard, Psycho Sid, Sid Vicious, whatever you want to call him. And the mystery of Pamela Anderson is solved because she comes out with Diesel. So for those of you waiting to hear the results of that, little over 20 and a half minutes on the match. Diesel wins it. So the finish happens where the referee twists his ankle. It wasn't on camera. And I went back a couple of times to make sure I didn't miss it. It was not on camera. He was reprimanding Sid. Shawn hits his sweet chin music. Referee is not there. And Sid's like, oh, shit, what the hell do I do? And he just throws. He throws, I think it's Earl Hebner, right?
It was Hebner, yeah.
Earl, yeah.
Yeah.
Just like tosses him in the ring. And then, Diesel kicks out. Eventually, Diesel slingshots Shawn. Now, he wanted to hit him on the exposed turnbuckle that Sid had opened up. But then he hits the second turnbuckle, hits a boot to the face, jackknifes him, a really bad jackknife. Shawn, like he picks him up, and Shawn almost like stands up. And when he drops him, he like lands on his feet. So, yeah, I don't know if Shawn just like Wade says he overbumped. I don't think Shawn did it on purpose. I think it was just a momentary,
No, Shawn and Nash were, tight.
They were boys, yeah.
You wouldn't put that past Shawn in against maybe a different opponent, but he's not gonna do that to Kevin Nash.
I'll give you Wade's rating before I get your thoughts. 3 3/4, John. The match didn't surpass the high expectations, but probably didn't fall short either. Michael showed he is a top worker, but didn't exactly rise to a new level. If the two have a series of matches, perhaps the next being at the May 14th pay-per-view, this was a well-booked first match in the series. It was hurt by the poor powerbomb.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. And I think, overbooking with Sid, there was maybe a little bit of issues. We didn't talk about this. They've got all the photographers at ringside in anticipation of LT.
Yes.
And there were multiple times throughout this show where they just felt like they were in the way. And I think this was one of those cases where it was hard to see what was going on because you got all these, press, or maybe they were real press, I don't know. But anyways, all these photographers there kind of distracting things.
Shawn actually throws one out of the way because they were going to do the bump. They were going to do a bump into the ring post, and Shawn's like, "Dude, get out of the way." And that's because they wanted to do the spot with Diesel where he hurt his ribs. So Shawn like throws the guy off.
Right, and so you had that, and that was a big part because he sold those ribs throughout the match. The exposed turnbuckle ends up not coming into play.
No.
But correct me if I'm wrong. My recollection is that Shawn gets upset the next night at Raw and tells Sid he's going to give him the night off. And Sid snaps on Shawn at that point, and then Diesel comes out. Am I wrong? I mean, that was the next night.
Yeah, right? we'll go right to that because I had that in my notes to talk about. That's really what ends up being the story. It's the story happens the next night. And it's funny, there was an Instagram post, and I normally don't read too much into these, but apparently that was decided like the day of Raw. Like Vince, the post basically says that Vince was talking to, I think it was Patterson, and I forget who else, but he's like, am I the only one that sees we have a baby face on our hands with Shawn? Because if you look at the finish, right? So it's an accident that the referee twists his ankle. I mean, maybe there was something else planned and Sid was supposed to do something to the ref. So it all kind of worked out because like if what happened the next night was part of the plan, then you would have to have had Sid do something to screw up the match. He really doesn't. I mean,
he really doesn't, unless he was supposed to go into the exposed turnbuckle and he was too far away. So he goes into the middle one. I don't know, but it's confusing in hindsight. I was really expecting him to hit that exposed turnbuckle
Yeah.
because in my mind, I'm thinking that's why he's upset with Sid the next night.
Yeah.
There's also a post-match interview in the back where Sid and Sean are totally on the same page.
That's my
So
point. That's
I
my
don't
point.
I 100% believe that it was a Monday decision because Sean was getting better reactions than I would have guessed as a heel, and Diesel was getting more tepid reactions already as
Hmm.
a babyface. The There was definitely some boos when Diesel kicked out of the Sweet Chin music.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there were definitely some boos when Sean didn't kick out of the jackknife. Um, and again, you could book it. You could book a sloppy jackknife to be an excuse for Sean kicking out the first time. And they can
Mhm.
say, clearly, Diesel didn't hit it because of his ribs with as much power as he normally does. You go another 30 seconds, then he hits it for real and gets the pin.
Yeah.
And I was almost thinking they were going to do that. So when the pin came, I was like, really?
Yeah.
That's off of that weak jackknife? That was the end?
And the match, like a lot of Diesel matches, just didn't have like a flow. Like it didn't have, typically when a baby face comes back, you have some kind of sequence or something. Like it just felt like, okay, I'm hitting these moves and I'm scoring the pin and we're going home. Like it wasn't really, you didn't really build up to that,
Yeah.
like nowadays, you build up with Cody, you build up to the crossroads, with Gunther, you build up to the his version of the power bomb, whatever. There's usually some kind of lead into it where it feels like the end. This just felt like, oh, that was it. Okay.
Yeah. And overall, I mean, I still think it was a good match.
Yeah, it
And
was fine.
overall, I would still contend that there's nothing at WrestleMania 9 that rose to this level quality of in-ring
Yeah.
wrestling. But anyways,
And
it's still
I really think that they were probably in real time thinking that there was going to be a series. And that's with the In Your House pay-per-views about to start. Wade talks about this. The pace of booking was going to have to increase. So you might have seen Diesel and Sean at the next show,
right.
and then maybe a third, because, now he likes to do his 3-match. So that might have been a 3-match series, or maybe Sid gets involved. I don't know. But yeah, I think I think looking at how unless the referee was supposed to admonish Sid, and let's just say he didn't twist his ankle, you still have Sean super kick Diesel, right? And
But he's
then
distracted by
he
Sid,
was
so the
distracted by
pin doesn't
Sid.
come right away.
But
Yeah.
then they're on the same page. Like you said, they're on the same page. So it's really interesting. It's really interesting. Let me ask you this before we get to the next match. What do you think of the decision to turn Sean? Wade was actually, what he said was, I thought this quote was very interesting. You know, they're not going to fight the crowd. Shocking, right? Uh, they're going to have Sean be what Ric Flair should have been the last 8 years. So this is 1995. Have him be a guy that if he gets cheered, he gets cheered. You can make him a heel. He could be a tweener. I think Sean, you know, I don't know. What do you think of the decision to turn Sean the next night?
Well, Sean was my favorite guy, so I was cheering him no matter
Yeah,
what. So I think
yeah,
at the time I was definitely like into him turning and being a baby face again. And I think there was a lot of there was a lot of good chemistry with him and Diesel
yeah.
from when they were both heels. So you could see them now. We're going to get to see them having that same chemistry as baby faces. So I think it made a lot of sense. I
And
didn't
you
have
had
any
Sid,
issues. Say again?
and you had Sid.
You had Sid. And of course, eventually he and Sid are both baby faces. But
Right.
that's a little ways down the line.
That's a little ways. Well, that's when Nash leaves the company.
But
I
you
I
can see the issue is that it's a too heavy with the baby faces, and maybe that's another reason you get the Allied Powers team.
Right.
And now that Backlund's not going to be in the main event picture as a heel, Owen's not in the picture, Yoko's not in the picture.
And
So
then
who do
Bam
you
Bam goes
have?
babyface.
Bam Bam goes babyface. So they end up turning Mabel, and that's a big snooze. So that's the only issue with Sean going babyface is you've got Sean, Brett, Diesel, Bam Bam, although Bam Bam doesn't get pushed huge, but he's still, and you don't have that same heel because you've got the weak, oh, you Undertaker, babyface. So
Hey,
you've got a pretty
Razor.
razor babyface, and yeah, your top heel at this point is Jarrett as the kind of weak Weasley IC title holder. So
The Million Dollar
yeah,
Corporation.
and you got the $1 Million Corporation who were ineffective.
Yeah.
So it was a weak time for. I mean, like I said, I like Sean. I loved Sean. I was happy to cheer for Sean, but you almost needed a corresponding move,
Yeah.
uh, like a Brett going heel or something, or
I
like to
made
your
the
point,
argument for that at the Rumble.
yeah, Luger going heel and sticking around as a heel. You needed something to offset it other than Mabel.
Yeah. Yep.
So
I made that argument for Brett. And again, Lex Luger, I think Lex Luger's position in the company really changes a lot on this card because there's so much, if he was in a top role, again, maybe he's your champion, or maybe he wins the Rumble and he challenges, a heel Brett. Brett gets a title back, but I don't know. That's something that we could ponder. And we'll talk about. I think when we do In Your House, we'll talk more about the because that's a short show. We'll have a little more time to talk about the baby face
sure.
and the heel side of the ledger. We can kind of even open with that. But in the interest of time, we will move to the main event, which is Bam Bam Bigelow taking on New York Football Giants legend and Hall of Famer Lawrence Taylor. No, I don't have any bias there.
Well, but as a 49er fan, it's not like what they were doing with LT wasn't legit. I
Yeah,
mean, you and I can argue between LT and Ronnie Lott, but as the greatest defensive players of all time. But
yeah,
it's not like anyone's going to be sitting there going, "Oh, Lawrence Taylor isn't one of the all-time greats," right? So it was a big deal.
yeah.
And to your point earlier, he was still young. I mean, he retired fairly young. He's just a year or two removed from his NFL career. So it's not like you're going back finding somebody who, had been
Right.
retired 5, 6 years. He's still athletically, in his prime, you could say,
Yeah.
or close to it.
He's 30,
So
36 years old at this pay-per-view.
So yeah, I looked it up. I couldn't remember the exact age, but I remember it was like, yeah, in the mid 30s. So
And he was
yeah,
always a controversial figure. I mean, LT had his, Justin will tell you, Lawrence Taylor had his moments, he,
yeah.
but he was a personality, and it made some sense. I thought so. Real quick, let's just go over the stats of the match here, and then we'll get to it. A little less than 12 minutes. Taylor wins the match. He hits back-to-back elbows off the ropes, and then he goes up to the second rope, hits one, and scores the pin. Wade has it at 2.25. And I'll tell you, the write-up on the match was actually fairly positive from both Bruce Mitchell, Wade, and Chris Savisa, columnist at the time. I thought, honestly, now maybe this is me being a Giant fan, I thought this was on the higher end of celebrity matches. Was it a smooth match? Yeah, I mean, you got to understand who's in there, And I'll shout out to Justin on this for calling it out. Pat Patterson as the referee was absolutely the right call
Hmm.
because he's going to be in there to make sure everything goes smooth.
Yeah.
I think my biggest problem, though, with it, and I guess, again, you have to be forgiving of it because it's a celebrity, getting in there for the first time. It doesn't feel like Taylor gives Bigelow like any kind of heat segment.
Mm.
Like anytime Bigelow hits a move, Taylor kicks out and he's coming right back. Like the selling, that was my only problem with it. But I think overall, it wasn't terrible.
I mean, I'm right there with you. I think for a celebrity, I mean, like we said, we're talking top athlete. So, it's not like an actor or an actor or a musician, getting involved. But for somebody not trained, doing this for the first time, I'm I was impressed at the time, and looking back on it 30 years later, I'm still impressed with the
Yeah.
job he did. We gotta, give Bam Bam his props. I mean, he's got to be among the more underrated workers when you just look at wrestling history. I think,
Underrated, underappreciated, and
yeah,
underused.
yeah, for sure. And this was, and I mean, I would not have been, again, as a 15-year-old at the time, I wasn't thinking about, oh boy, Bam Bam Bigelow needs to be, for me, it's hindsight. But, you look back and you're like, wow, that was a good match. And yeah, you can nitpick here and there, but given the talent and the lack of experience, it worked and it was what it needed to be. And you get that nice moment with the celebrity. And
Yeah.
at the time, I remember kind of questioning having that as the main event, the last match instead of the title match. But I don't question it like strongly. I get it. So
Well, Wade makes
yeah.
a point about that. If I may, he makes a point about that where whereas if you didn't do it as the main event, let's say you did it as the lead in to Diesel Shawn Michaels after the LT Bigelow match, the press is not going to care. Like they're all going to check out. Like they're not going to care.
Yeah,
So it's
that's
a
fair.
way for Vince to kind of keep everybody engaged.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And as we said at the beginning, everything WrestleMania in those first however many years was so about the celebrities. And
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, you're not talking about celebrities wrestling, Mr. T did, but you're talking about celebrities singing the national anthem or as a special referee or doing some other act. Right? Didn't you have, who did you have in Jake Roberts' corner at WrestleMania 3? Why am I
Alice
blanking on?
Cooper.
Thank you. I'm like picturing him in my mind having a pre-senior moment. Those were the types of celebrity involvements other than like Mr. T for the most part. So to have somebody of LT's stature and fame and in a match, that was a big deal because you didn't get that every year or
Mm-hmm.
very often. So it makes a lot of sense. And
And I think
again,
there was a
he
self
carried his
awareness,
weight.
if I may, John, not to
Mm.
cut, there was a self awareness on WWF's part because I think they knew that the matches that they had with their regular stars just didn't have the juice. I mean, if you take out the LT Bigelow match, this is maybe an in your house card, which is fine in May.
Right.
It's fine, but
Well, for half the money.
for half the month. But for WrestleMania, you need something that's got some juice.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that was all. I think it just um I would say one could argue the world title match should always be last.
Yeah.
But I think other than that, when you look at everything, it made the most sense really to go last with this one. And um you also had, we mentioned Salt and Peppa getting cut out of the Peacock, the ring entrance with them, that was a big deal.
I
That
wanted to hear what a man. I was looking forward to that too, man.
Yeah, and they were huge.
Sure.
Again, we're not talking about like a B level music act. They were
Yeah.
an A level at that time. So that was a big deal. And it was part of the whole presentation, part of the WrestleMania vibe. And so, yeah, I think it ended on a high note with LT getting up on the shoulders of the wrestlers, one of whom is a future member of the Four Horsemen, and you know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
you know, And my favorite, Ken Norton Jr., coming off of a Super Bowl win, the last Super Bowl win, which I still can't believe 30 years later. But
The one where they
anyways,
smashed the Chargers in that game, right? If I remember
yeah,
correctly. Yep.
I have the Super Bowl champion hat from that year.
There you
Again,
go.
I'm 15, I'm in high school, and I have not bought a 49ers hat since then because at some point I said I'll buy the next Super Bowl champion hat.
There you go.
And
Oh
I did not
man.
imagine I would still be waiting for that hat 30 years later. But
Well,
anyways,
you were there a couple of times. Let's see, 2013, last year, and how many didn't
they
they
went
played the
with
Chiefs twice, right?
they played the Chiefs twice. Once with Jimmy Garoppolo, yeah, and once with
Oh, Jimmy.
yeah. And then yeah, before that with Kaepernick and the Harbaugh Bowl with the Ravens,
Yep.
where the 49ers were down by like 40 points. The lights went out in the stadium. They
I
came back
remember.
on,
I
and
remember.
suddenly the two teams switched, and all of a sudden the 49ers came back and had this close to a game-winning touchdown at the end. So,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, that I was hyped at the time to see Ken Norton because I mean he was a real good player, but he was like the personality. He
Right.
had so much personality with the cowboy hat and he would get the touchdown and he'd go up and punch the goalpost, which would probably be like a 15-yard penalty now. But
Yeah.
at the time, he could punch the goalpost because his dad was a boxer. And
Yep.
so it was a big deal as a 49er fan at the time. Getting to see him at WrestleMania was cool. And I'm sure the fans of all the other, players who were in LT's corner, felt the same. It was a cool moment.
So you had Ken Norton Jr., Chris Spielman, Ricky Jackson, Carl Banks, who I think of more as a giant, but they showed him in a Browns uniform. Um, Steve Mongo McMichael, the Four Horsemen of which you speak, and Reggie White, the late Reggie White. Um, by the way, Steve Mike McMichael is not. I think he's still with us, right? But he's not doing well. Yeah, it's sad. If anybody, yeah, just sad to see
Yeah.
where he is.
Yeah.
Um, let's see here, real quick. I got a couple of minutes. Yeah, we gave our thoughts on the match. Just a couple of highlights. A lot of slaps. There was a knee to the chest at one point. LT hit a DDT. He was trying to do a lot of the stuff that Diesel showed him with like a back suplex out of a leg hold, and then like he tries a jackknife, but it's just like he just flips Bam Bam. I mean, listen, what do you want from the guy?
I don't
Justin,
think anybody cared, right?
no,
Nobody
it didn't
cared.
matter. It didn't
No.
matter. Patterson definitely the unsung hero. Yeah, I mean, listen, he had to be there. I thought it was the right call. Real quick, I want to point out something that Wade pointed out. There was a lot of coverage of the LT Bigelow match by sports media. Said a lot of the outlets were making fun of LT taking part, saying that Giant fans to prefer to remember him for his football career. Wrestling Bigelow will be embarrassing and it'll make him pathetic. All right, and all this other stuff. Another sports writer said, I'm sure he's confident he'll win. Did he see the script? And what Wade says, and I could see Wade saying this, what's actually pathetic is this self-righteous, nonsensical idea that playing pro football or acting in movies is noble, but participating in pro wrestling is disgusting and degrading. And you know what? Right on.
Yeah,
Right on.
for
Okay?
sure.
Because it's ridiculous.
Well, and that second quote you brought up, it's that whole thing about pointing out that it's scripted. Like you're the first one to get that scoop.
Right.
Like every time a wrestler would be on Larry King, he would ask them about like, now, do the fans know that it's fake? And it's like, yes,
Right.
yes, Vince McMahon gave testimony in front of like Congress or something like 20 years ago that it was fake. Like
Right. Right.
I
Yeah.
read
It's
Bobby
like,
Heenan in Bobby Heenan's book. He talks about when he smartened up when he was training to become a wrestler and they took him to like, threaten him about what we're about to tell you. If you ever, reveal this secret, we'll kill you and all this stuff. And they tell him that it's fake. And he was like, well, duh, I've seen a real fight before. Like,
right.
it's like, no, yeah, maybe some little kids, but yeah, it's that gotcha. Ooh, I
Yeah.
told him that it was scripted. Look at how smart I am.
It's just, I'm so sick of, you guys talk about that stuff as if it's real. Listen, so what's the difference between talking about wrestling, talking about Star Wars, talking about the Marvel universe, sport? Like, it's an art form. It's choreographed. The outcomes are planned. We're fucking over it. We get it. We've been over it for 40 years. Okay.
Well, and there's always two questions, right? The first question is, do you know it's fake, right?
Oh,
And
God.
then the second question is, well, if you know it's fake, why do you watch? And
Exactly.
my response is always, well, I know zombies are fake, and I still watch Walking Dead. I know
Bingo.
dragons are fake, but I watch Game of Thrones. I mean, it's like
Yeah. Yeah.
it
But
doesn't
it's
matter.
funny, though.
Everything's fake.
It's funny though. He points it out, but these people are paying attention and they're writing about it. So it's
Well, and fast forward about 2 years when you've got Austin, Rock, Hogan, Goldberg, both companies are appearing on the cover of Entertainment Weekly, TV Guide.
right.
That snobbishness when you've got Raw and Nitro both pulling in 3-4 million viewers a week
Yep.
head to
It's
head.
amazing when the money's there to be made. It's amazing how everybody's tone changes. Okay.
Yeah, there's
Right.
and let's ask LT 30 years ago, right after this match, about the
Oh, he's
athleticism
exhausted.
it took for a 13-minute match versus, and again, he's a great athlete. He's an amazing athlete. He was 36, so he's not some over the hill guy.
Yep.
It's a different kind of, you always hear that too. It's a different type of athleticism that it takes to A, look good, B, protect yourself, C, protect your opponent, while making it look like you're actually, hurting each other. It's an amazing amount of strength, agility, coordination, balance, et cetera, et cetera. So the athleticism is there. Now we can complain about at times, and we do, about the quality of the stories, the quality of the
Right. But that's those
acting.
of us that are immersed in the universe. We're
Right.
immersed in
But
it. We're watching it. And to have people say, "Oh, that's all fake." Okay, so is the script too. As Four Eyes Malone points out here, any daytime scripted show where they argue for clicks. All right, and silly how people still say this stuff. Same people who watch reality TV. I mean, that's probably more because they think that's reality TV, and it's not.
reality is just as scripted as, well, I mean, that kind of reality shows are just as
Right,
scripted
right.
as,
So,
yeah. So yeah, but I think, when you do have those celebrities, and we mentioned Tyson in a couple years after this,
mhm,
they bring those eyes, and then it's up to the promotion to keep those eyes.
correct.
This didn't keep any eyes.
No, no,
WrestleMania 14 kept eyes.
correct. And
So that's the big difference. You have a
mhm,
big lead in. NCAA, March Madness brings new eyes to Collision and has a big bump in ratings. What do? They have a 20-minute time limit match, title match, draw.
yeah,
And what happens the next week? They lose 200,000. you
yep,
gotta you gotta lead in, you got a celebrity endorsement, you got whatever brings extra eyes. Now it's up to you to keep them, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And this was a
right,
case where any extra buys that they got because of LT, who cares? And not because of LT or Bam Bam, but just the show overall being lack of excitement, lack
right.
of compelling angles going out of it. Why do you want to tune in to Raw the next week or the next night?
All right. I will say though that the Raw after, we'll close on this thought. The Raw after, I think this is probably the first Raw after WrestleMania that has that hot angle. Like I can't remember. Well, There's only 2 years of Raw at this
Right.
point.
There's only a
There's
couple
only
to
2
go
years of
on.
Raw.
You
I
used to
don't
have to
remember
wait until
anything.
Superstars.
Yeah, I don't remember much like in the way of like, in the syndicated era or the first two Raws, 93 and 94. I don't remember heavy angles. This was like the first one where you do a heavy angle following WrestleMania.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I remember because I couldn't get the pay-per-views back then, tuning into the first Superstars after WrestleMania 6 to learn who Hogan or Warrior.
Yeah.
Like that was one that was a big deal for me as a fan because of all of that intrigue. But again, that's not an angle that comes out of it on that Superstars. That's just tuning in and finding out Warrior won.
Warriors champ.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, but again, they're gonna introduce this in your house concept. So they've got less time after WrestleMania to their next pay-per-view than they
Yeah.
typically had, especially when you go back a couple years to August. They've added the in between with the King of the Ring. But when you had to go from, March or April to August, you can't start right away hot shotting things because you've got that
You
long
got to
build
build
to the
time. You got to
now
build.
you've got a month or 2 months, whatever. I guess it was 2 months later you said whatever it was to this first in your house. So you've got to get the ball rolling
Yep.
a little quicker now. And
Yep.
nowadays with Backlash sometimes being 3 weeks after Mania, which is insane, you really have to, and that's why Backlash for so many years turned into the WrestleMania rematch show because you
Yep.
didn't have time to spin anything new.
Agreed. Uh, Actually, one more thought to close out. Thumbs up or thumbs down on this show?
Oh, thumbs down.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's a thumbs down. I said that WCW was an uncensored 95 was a middle finger, not thumbs down, because it was just terrible. This is a thumbs down, but all right, not so bad. There were a couple of things. The LT match I thought was very good. At least the world title match was good. So it's not awful, but for WrestleMania, for what WrestleMania is supposed to be, this is
Right.
supposed to be your hallmark event. It was not a wrestle. I mean, this maybe qualifies as an in your house.
Right. And coming off of 10,
Yes,
you have to take that into account.
that's a big point. That is a very big point.
Yeah.
John, your social media and what you do for the torch to send everybody home.
Yeah, you can find me. I'm at Blue Sky now, no longer on Twitter at John Mezzera, my clever handle. And I write the Raw hits and misses for pwtorch.com. So this week's column came out yesterday. In the Netflix era, I'm making a more concerted effort to actually finish on Monday nights and be able to get my hits and misses up Tuesday. For a long time, I was finishing on Tuesday and getting that up Wednesday. 2.5 hours is better than 3 hours for getting that done. So anyways, you can catch that usually sometime Tuesday afternoon, my hits and misses. It's a pretty simple, what do I like? What do I not like? And I will say there's been a few more misses lately than 6 months ago, but still overall, I've been enjoying the product. More hits than misses, but more misses than there had been.
Unfortunately, I have to agree with you on that. All right, John. So we're riding this 95 train together. So we'll be back sometime in May. We'll set that up where we'll look at the first in your house. I'm really looking forward to that. And before we go, I want to thank everybody in the chat: Four Eyes Malone, Justin Girardi, Sean Plickta, Azan White, and there was somebody else. Oh, Derek Hubbard was in the chat earlier. So I want to thank everybody for your comments. Always appreciate the chat here on the PW Torch YouTube page. Of course, if you are listening to this afterwards as a Torch VIP member, I thank you. If you are not a Torch VIP member, then let me see. I don't want to. Oh, that's not it. See, I have to put the caveat. I don't want to screw this up. Again, pwtorch.com/govip. Plenty of options, including PayPal and Patreon and things like that. Of course, please like this show, comment, and subscribe. Of course, the show is ending now, so comment time is up. But next time, we love the company, love the Love the chat. Appreciate you all, John. Appreciate this, and we'll talk to you. Well, I'll talk to you before next month, but we'll be on this platform in a month.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks as always, Frank.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Always great having you. And for John Mezzera, I am Torch contributor Frank Peteani, reminding you, when you are looking for nostalgia, you've come to the right place when we talk pro wrestling then and now. Have a good one, everyone.